When a parent such as myself chooses to no longer vaccinate their child, if there's an infectious disease doing the rounds, as there was last year with measles, our children would be asked to stay home from schools and kindies. We would then go and get an antibody test to see if our children had acquired enough antibodies naturally by being exposed to the disease previously. If the test shows that they've developed antibodies to the disease, they're not seen as a threat by the medical establishment for catching or even passing it on. They can then return to school. They would be considered to have been exposed to it naturally and developed immunity to it. And now the same antibody test is also available to those who choose to vaccinate. They can get themselves tested to see if the vaccine has given them enough antibodies to protect them. Now, it gets a bit more involved than that, but that's the general principle. The government and the Ministry of Health can also do what is called a serological survey, where they test large groups of the population to assess the prevalence of a disease in a population. For an example, all pregnant women in New Zealand are currently recommended to have rubella IgG antibody screening at their first antenatal visit. So that would be considered a large-scale survey. Now, we have an election coming up at the end of the week, probably the most important election in decades since I've been an eligible voter. It's been a crazy year, but is this election going to be won on track record or the worship of a false idol? Sadly, I feel it'll be the latter, because if the media were doing their job, if the opposition parties were doing their job, this current government would have been dragged out by the scruff of their neck long ago. Now I want you to go find one of these. It's a dictionary. Most houses still have them. And I want you to look up the word conspire. And what does it mean? Ashley Blomfield had this to say earlier about antibody testing. Now he's a doctor. He knows the importance of this kind of testing.
The advantage of antibody testing is that you don't need to do it in a laboratory and you can do it rapidly and get a result quite quickly, and also may play a role as part of our ongoing surveillance.
So we're in October. And why hasn't this become a part of the government's strategy in doing mass antibody testing to show if the community has developed immunity to coronavirus? If it has, we could still keep our borders closed, but we could open up the local economy without any alert level changes that destroy businesses, lives, and everything else we have to mentally struggle through this year. Now, there are those that are going to argue that lockdowns have flattened the curve. And Jacinda and Ashley are heroes for saving the nation. But the numbers just don't add up to a pandemic. And they never have, and they never will. We don't have hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of deaths. We don't hear of our ICUs overrun. We don't have our hospitals splitting at the seams. We just keep hearing of cases. Or do we get daily press conferences for the cancer cases diagnosed every day? Because today you're going to be pretty hard pushed to find someone who hasn't either fought, is currently fighting, or has died from cancer. Now that is something that's reached pandemic levels. How about daily press conferences for diabetes, heart disease, domestic violence, child abuse? We don't get those. But they all outnumber the daily coronavirus cases. We have more cases of stubbed toes per day than we do coronavirus. So why no antibody testing when antibody testing kits for coronavirus are in the country? Why would a doctor not be pushing this? Surely a nation testing positive for antibodies would stop the unnecessary lockdowns. Surely we could keep small businesses, family businesses running. Surely this is the way forward for any competent government. A way to save the economy, a way to give people hope. It's been an awful year. Take a look at this clip from a company who has brought antibody testing kits into New Zealand.
The advantage of antibody testing is that you don't need to do it in a laboratory and you can do it rapidly and get a result quite quickly.
Approved by the FDA and for use in the EU. Quick, easy, no fear of having your brain punctured. So why are we not doing antibody testing, Jacinda? Why are you still relying on a PCR test that experts at Johns Hopkins University have said is not reliable and can pick up previous viral material?
So when we get a PCR test, we don't know whether or not that means you're infectious. Clearly, if you have symptoms, you probably are infectious. But if you are somebody that's completely asymptomatic and you go and get tested, does that mean that you are actually infectious? Or is that just viral remnants that might have been there because you were sick maybe 2 weeks ago and you had mild symptoms and you didn't know it and you're somebody who constantly sheds?
Why? Could it be that people within your government and your Ministry of Health have conspired to make sure that it doesn't happen? You see, on April 22nd, the Health Minister, pursuant to Section 37 of the Medicines Act 1981, made illegal the import, manufacture, packaging, sale, supply, or use of any test kits for COVID-19, unless approved, and they have chosen not to approve them. They know antibody testing would be a game changer for the nation returning to a normal life. But this government has rewritten legislation to suit their desired outcome, whatever that will be. It's certainly not an outcome for the well-being of the nation. And this notice is valid for another 6 months. We've already seen the Prime Minister lock down a region at a moment's notice. How many lockdowns based on measly number of cases are they going to roll out? How many lockdowns based on the measly number of cases are the people of this country going to tolerate? None of this is about being kind. None of this is about moving forward. None of this is about great leadership. The rewriting of laws to suit your desired outcome is deliberate.
So instead I want to send a clear message to the New Zealand public. We will share with you the most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health.
But when you question the honesty and transparency of this government, you get the head-tilting, pursed lips and angry stare. That is nothing more than denial. As I said, we're about to have the most important election this country has faced in terms of direction that we are headed. Now, I don't care who you vote for. Just don't vote based on someone's media-driven false popularity. Look into their track record. Are we better off than when they took power? Are we headed in a direction that benefits the people of this country? What will the future look like for your children? Because if this government is willing to change legislation to disrupt and control your life, in what could be considered a deliberate crashing of the economy, I dread to think what they will be capable of if they're not held accountable. Share what this government has done. Share the lengths they are willing to go to, because our media agencies aren't holding them accountable. The Governor-General's not holding them accountable. The opposition parties are not holding them accountable. The voters who need to hold governments accountable.